Well, for more on the reaction to this, we're joined right now by Kaveh Afrasiabi. He's a former advisor to Iran's nuclear negotiation team. He's also written a book that is titled Iran Nuclear Accord and the Remaking of the Middle East. Welcome to our broadcast. Thank you for joining us.
Nice to be here.
As you know, the leaders of Britain, Germany, and France have declared their backing for the Iran nuclear deal, renounced by President Trump, saying it is in our shared national interest. How does this affect Mr. Trump's stance?
Well, hopefully over time, Mr. Trump will listen to these very close European allies, particularly England, because Theresa May, as we know, had repeatedly called the White House prior to his Friday announcement, urging him not to scrap the deal. And unfortunately, Mr. Trump decided to listen to the far-right voices within his constituency and ignored these voices of reason. And now we see the firestorm of global backlashes against Trump that includes also very prominent voices in the U.S. politics, ranging from the former Secretary of State John Kerry, who blasted Mr. Trump's decision as dangerous to world peace, etc., Nancy Pelosi, the minority whip, and a few other key lawmakers in the U.S. Congress, where this matter is now being hurled to, and there's very little likelihood that the U.S. Congress will appease Mr. Trump and do what he likes. So it's really a very erroneous, wrong move on his part that is bound to backfire against him, and it's quite embarrassing to the U.S.'s international credibility.
Speak to the violations that Mr. Trump is referring to in the agreement.
Well, you know, there were a few incidental matters that were quickly resolved by Iran and reflected in the repeated IAEA reports on Iran, including the latest one, that categorically states that Iran is in full technical compliance with the nuclear accord known as the JCPOA. So the issues that Mr. Trump raised are really, you know, just desperate attempts for him to find any shred of evidence to knock down the agreement, and that simply doesn't wash with the international community, as we have seen, as your reporter just stated.
Not the entire international community. Let's note that Israel and also Saudi Arabia are siding with Mr. Trump, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is saying in a few years' time, the world's foremost terrorist regime will have an arsenal of nuclear weapons. What do you make of his comments?
Well, I'm not surprised at all to hear such comments from him. Mr. Netanyahu has a lot of political troubles at home. A good deal of national security experts and former officials in the Israeli government have sided with the supporters of the nuclear accord and oppose his view because they think that this is a long-term, robust agreement that puts to rest the anxieties about Iran's proliferation concerns. As Mr. Netanyahu conveniently overlooks that, and you know, there's a lot of other issues on his plate with respect to the pending, you know, Palestinian-Arab issues that is trying to deflect attention from by zeroing on Iran, and that, you know, is really not a very productive approach to this issue.
Where does this leave President Hassan Rouhani, who is saying he's going to stick to the deal within the framework of international law?
Well, as expected, President Rouhani made an instant, very firm and principled response to Mr. Trump's demonization of Iran and all the, you know, political insults hurled at Tehran, and vowed to stick with the term as long as the other signatories abide by it. And we have seen that, you know, Russia, China, and the three Europeans have immediately rebuffed Mr. Trump. So Mr. Trump finds himself in a very isolated situation right now, and all his spin doctors will not succeed to turn the situation around in his favor.
Well, Kaveh Afrasiabi, thank you so much for joining us live from Boston.